Janine, you're good to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our summer survival series. We're very lucky to have with us today Dr. Nancy Schwartz to present encouraging language and life skills at home during COVID-19 shutdown. Dr. Schwartz is the founder and director of the Communication Clinic of Connecticut in Ridgefield, where she and her therapist have provided speech, language, and relatedness social skills services for over 30 years. Her expertise is in working with children with language problems, and in particular, children on the autistic spectrum or with speech apraxia. Dr. Schwartz holds a PhD in speech and a master's in communicative disorder. She has also been certified by the American Speech and Hearing Association and in relationship development intervention. Dr. Schwartz has taught at multiple universities on both the undergraduate and graduate levels in California, Connecticut, and New York. She was the director of the Scottish Rite Institute for Childhood Aphasia in Los Angeles. She and her therapist have been offering teletherapy for students and for parent training since COVID-19 shutdown. For more information, you can visit her website at Communication Clinic of Connecticut. Your moderators today are Eve Kessler, the founder of SpedNet Wilton, Carolina Corrigan, and I'm Janine Kelly. Just a couple ground rules before we get started. Many of you are already familiar with these. Please feel free to ask questions at the end of Nancy's presentation through the Q&A button. Don't use the chat because the Q&A button allows us to keep track of which questions have already been answered. Also, be mindful that this is an open forum and it's being recorded. We can't guarantee confidentiality, so you may not want to reveal any private information in your questions. Also, lastly, any information provided in this webinar by the presenter or the moderators is not intended to be legal or therapeutic advice. The information, content, and materials are for general purposes only, and all the materials will be posted on our website along with this video as it's being recorded at the end of this presentation. So with that being said, welcome Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And one of the things that Janine didn't mention is that in the clinic, we work very hard on teaching our students to think and to problem solve within life. And often within what that means is that we're asking them to cook and to do chores, so that this topic of the importance involving children in chores is something that we have embraced for the last 16 years at the clinic, and for me, well before that also. Not necessarily with my own children, but with everybody else's children. Often, children with special needs are treated almost as if they're guests in their own home. I've heard comments made by parents, for example, "Oh no, he's only 10, he doesn't need to learn to make his bed," or "I don't know if he, a 15-year-old boy, can wash a dish. I never asked him to." Or, "Yes, John can do some things for himself, but he has never, ever done anything to help someone else unless specifically asked." Or, "I don't expect him to clear the table. He has apraxia." Or, "She gets upset if she comes into the kitchen and the food is not on the table." I could go on with comments made by parents as sort of excuses for why their children are not doing chores. But I've also, on the flip side, heard at many conferences the conversation that, the statements that children with special needs, 17, 18, as they approach the transitional years, really have strong deficits in adaptive skills. So it's an important thing for us to consider when we work with our kids in terms of teaching them to actually do adaptive life skills. It's usually a progression to the state of guestness in a home. It occurs naturally, basically out of necessity. It's not the fault of the parent, but rather a survival technique. As the parents often state, it's faster and easier for them to do a task by themselves as opposed to involving the child in the task. Given the hectic packed schedules that most of the special needs kids have, being on time is a necessity and a challenge. Often the parents feel that the child's life is already too difficult, so why make it even more difficult by asking them to do chores? When raising a typical child, it's a push-pull between the parent and the child. The parent will tell the child what to do, or the parent will try to help the child to do something, and the next thing you hear is that the child is saying, "Leave me alone, I can do it myself." It's harder with the special needs child, as the special needs child doesn't guide the parent in this way and doesn't create the changes and the challenges for himself. In fact, the child may have fear challenges as he has not had success in accepting change. It is the need for feeling competent that keeps the child from fighting the challenges and accepting problems. It's the repetitive routines in which the child finds their competence. And they don't want to break out of that because they're often fearful of experiencing failure. And so it's the lack of change that's not healthy that we really need to help the child move from, because that lack of change creates a static life. The child may insist on eating the same lunch for years and years, or having to have the table set in exactly the same way, or needing to be at home at exactly the same time. These routines help the child to survive, but also in many ways negatively impact the flow of the family and the ability of the family to act as a unit. But in some ways, what winds up happening is that the parents adapt to these strict adherence to routines. It's certainly easier to allow the child to stay within a routine and not to challenge the child because of the tantrums and the resulting behaviors. So the parents will give in and kind of work around those routines. But in fact, what we're doing is we're negatively impacting the child's ability to adapt in life and accept change, as they will have to at some point. Therefore, it's the parent's job to actually act as a guide for the child, despite the pushback from the child. They have to figure out how to guide the child without overwhelming the child, and help the child to think about life and to be part of life. It's our job as teachers and parents to guide the challenge, to offer challenges to the child without overwhelming the child. If you choose to do functional living activities with a child as a means of involving their child in life, it may take you a lot longer to do a chore with the child as opposed to doing the task alone. However, the child's acquisition of the ability to do that problem will eventually allow you to do something else while the child actually does that chore on his own. So why should we wait until your child's adaptive skills are tested and found to be low? Why wait until the child is an adult and he has to develop his life survival skills? Don't you need time around the house? Don't you want to stop having a permanent guest? Don't you want more time for yourself? If you're still not convinced, what I'd like to do now to help eliminate your guilt, because I know that a whole nother part of it is my special needs child has so much that he has to learn. Why should I push him to have to do yet something else? And what I want to do now is explain to you all the reasons why you need to, because it's not just that they're learning to do the adaptive skill, to do the chore. It's rather they have all sorts of life content that they need to learn about. They need to develop vocabulary of the names of materials, vocabulary of the action that they have to take, vocabulary that's related to the specific task. It's also an opportunity to learn to experience, share with others. Experience sharing is about talking about things that you've done in the past, talking about things that you're doing at the moment, referring back to something that you did together. So if you're in the process of washing the dishes, maybe you're going to think about and talk about how you wash the car together. Or if you're in the process of dusting with the child, you might talk about how you as a child helped your own mother to dust. Or the fact that nobody dusts anymore, and why should anybody bother to dust? But you're sharing experiences and you're talking about it and you're chatting as you go. Along that way, language development is fostered. You develop the vocabulary, you use that vocabulary in your sentences, you report information, you direct, you argue. All of these are uses of language that come out when you're doing something and doing something together. You wind up chaining sentences to describe the sequence of the steps for the task. You wind up talking about causal factors, and you wind up talking about what you're doing together. Also, when you're doing these tasks, the child becomes aware of cause and effect relationships, noticing that materials change based on what you do to them. A sponge turns black if you're wiping up black paint. A sponge turns white if you're wiping up white paint. Understanding that conditions have been caused by different actions. So for instance, you could have a spill that's caused by a spill of milk, a spill of juice, a spill of water. And no matter what, when you wipe up any of these spills, your cloth gets wet. Understanding that the actions the child takes can change based on the conditions. So if you wipe up a spill, that's one thing, but then you can also wipe a table to make it clean without an obvious spill. Understanding that conditions change even if you didn't plan for them to happen. So there can be different causes for something. So you're washing a car and now suddenly you knock down the bucket you're using. So now you have a spill to clean up. But guess what? It's outside, so it's really no big deal. Or another aspect that's fostered and taught during these chores are understanding the sequence of events, okay? Understanding that doing a task is made up of steps. Understanding that sometimes you have to change the sequence of steps. Understanding that elements within a sequence can actually change. So maybe you can use liquid soap for one activity, but powdered soap for another. Recognizing that events that occur in the middle of a task can then change the way you do the rest of the task. Or maybe you understanding that in order to complete the task and you're in a hurry, that you're going to skip a step, and maybe that step was just not all that important. Cognitive flexibility is, for many of our kids, a huge issue. It's why they get stuck in routines. It's why they might wind up throwing a tantrum when something is not done in exactly the way they want it to be done. By doing chores, you have a way of introducing and teaching about cognitive flexibility. You can understand that you can use the same materials for different tasks. For example, a sponge can be used to soak up a spill, or a sponge to wipe up a table, or a bucket to be used to wash a floor. A bucket can be used to wash a car. So you're using the flexibility is that you're using the same materials for different tasks. Or understanding that you can use different materials for the same task. You can wipe up a spill with a paper towel, or a sponge, or your shirt. It doesn't really make any difference as long as that spill gets soaked up. Or understanding that you can take a long time to do a task, or that you need to hurry because you do that task in a very short time. Realizing that different people do the same task in different ways. Understanding that specific elements can change. So instead of using the liquid soap, you can use the powdered soap. Understanding that the sequence of the steps can change in different ways, or understanding that there might be different endpoints to the task. And that's a huge thing. You know, just most of our kids are taught, finish the puzzle, finish your writing, finish this. So when you ask them to stop midway because you have to run out to get to the dentist's office, the child will refuse because he's so used to completing the task and having to finish it. This way, we're teaching the flexibility in terms of ending at different points. Flexible problem solving is fostered within chores as well. Making adjustments when materials are missing, making adjustments when time is short, making adjustments when something happens that's unexpected, making adjustments when you try and it doesn't work. So many of our kids, when they confront a problem, have a solution. Then the problem isn't solved. And guess what? They try the same solution over again. And then they try that same solution over again. So learning through chores that there are different ways to solve different problems or even the same problem is a very important part of flexible thinking. Also, if you're in the middle of doing a task and a tool breaks, then it's important that you learn that you can substitute another tool. Another aspect that's fostered by doing chores together is the concept that you that you have to remain within an interaction with another person, or even without another person. Remain in the interaction until the task is done, and remain in the interaction to work with another person. And in this way, the child learns within a task to assume a role while the other person does the other part of the job. Understanding that roles can be switched within a task, or understanding that there are certain challenges that the child has to fulfill himself in order to stay in his own role. Understanding that the child maybe needs to copy what the other person is doing, or that the child has to wait until the other person finish his role before he does his. So if one person's role is to pour something in and the other person's role is to stir, the child who's pouring has to wait until the person who's stirring is done stirring in that what he just poured before he pours again. So learning to adjust to another person is so important. Another aspect that's developed through chores is self-awareness. An awareness that I don't like to use a sponge when I'm wiping something up, but I do like to use a towel. But yet my brother likes to use a shirt, and when I like to use a paper towel. Recognizing that a task might be hard the first time, but it gets easier with practice. That's in a whole fostering the ability to learn over time, something that's so very important for everybody to learn. And that kind of self-awareness can come out of doing chores. Recognizing that helping someone else brings pleasure in yourself. Feeling good about yourself because you can complete a task necessary for life. Feeling competent because you can accomplish tasks. Feeling good about yourself by being part of being an active member in the family, and developing a sense of pride as others appreciate what you've done. All of that it comes through self-awareness as you work on chores. Or episodic memories are developed, being able to think about when you did a similar but different task, or when you're in the middle of one task and a problem arises and being able to say, oh, I remember when I did this with Dad. Now I'll do the same thing that Dad did. So that kind of memory development and being able to use one experience to supplement another experience is so vitally important. And again, it can come from doing chores together. You can learn to use the child can learn to use his eyes to visually reference information within tasks, to learn to scan the situation, to understand what needs to be done. Fine motor skills are fostered through doing chores. So many of our kids have weak fine motor skills. My attitude about it has so often been not that they necessarily can't do things, but they've just never had the opportunity to practice. We're not asking them to use their hands. Stringing beads on a string is not the same as squeezing a sponge. We need to give these kids chances to learn to use their hands. Maybe we're going to have to help. Maybe we're going to do it in small steps so that they learn at first to squeeze a small sponge, then to squeeze a big sponge. But the point is that they're going to learn out of necessity because they really need to learn to do these self-help skills. Basic functional science knowledge is fostered. When liquids must be soaked up, figuring out what materials work to soak up materials versus not. When doing cleaning tasks, observing the amount of soap that might need to be used, the ratio of water to cleaning liquid, how to deal with big spills versus little spills. That's all functional science knowledge. When cleaning tasks, we might have to think about the force, the speed, and the choice of materials that we work on. That's, again, basic science knowledge. When kids are cooking together with you, they begin to understand the impact of temperature change on materials and the transformation of materials from one state to another based on temperature change. Or that the type of spill means that you have to change the method. Hot water works a whole lot better than cold water when cleaning up a dirty dish. That's functional science. and along with that, basic academics are reinforced. When the child has to get specific number of items, when the child needs to recognize the labels of cleaning items, when the child needs to create space to put things away, there's a knowledge base of math. When the child needs to follow specific steps, all of this are basic academics. And then, of course, sensory issues are confronted. But more than this, the child is learning to become a contributing member of his family. And not only is he recognizing his own competence, but so are other people within the family beginning to recognize his competence and welcoming him on a different level, okay? And the other piece of it is, I don't know, somehow I've been cleaning a whole lot more than I have had to clean in the last, I don't know how many years. And the first time I cleaned the house after we were alone, locked down, I felt really good about it. I discovered things in my house I hadn't known existed for years. It was wonderful. The fifth, sixth time, it hasn't been quite so great, and I'm looking for different chores to do. And maybe that's the course that your child's going to take as well, okay? But that sense of competence, that sense of pride, I cleaned this, okay? I did this. It's such an essential piece. And what's truly amazing is that parents say to me, how am I going to make my child do it? It's not making them, it's guiding them, doing it together so it's fun doing it together so the child sees that what he's doing and thereby has a huge sense of competence about what he's doing. The key here is that the sense of competence acts as the motivator, and it is in fact a much better motivator than M&Ms. M&Ms you get satiated on. Competence you don't. Ask me to sing and I won't. Why? Because I'm an abominable at it. I don't feel competent, okay? Ask me to do something else and I might, because I do feel competent. That's what we have to develop in our children. That's what's so important. So the key here is that we need to develop a method to help you to bring your child into the game of doing chores. And the best way to do that is, in my experience, is by simplifying the task, making it easier for the child to participate, but yet still feel competent. So when you do a task and you take the child and you say, this is how you do it, I'm doing it, okay? The child's not doing it. Most of the time when you're doing it hand over hand, the child's gaze is one way, their hands are going another way, they're not participating. But if you take the same skill and you break it in two pieces, something like wiping a table, where one person sprays and now one person wipes, there's much greater likelihood that the child is going to feel competent because the role has been divided. The skill has been made easier. And you could do it, you could break it down even into smaller pieces if you had to, so that the child can feel competent. So if it was like spray and wipe, where one person sprays and the other one wipes, and that's too hard, so now you can break it down where maybe you pull the paper towel one way and the child pulls it back. So now you're even splitting the role of how to move the paper towel when wiping. So there are ways of breaking roles apart. And what we call this in the clinic are patterned activities. And in fact, you have a handout about patterned activities. And it is where we break things down. So what I'd like to do is show you some videos of where people have divided roles. And the easiest role for a child to be part of is something called a giver-putter. Usually the adult will give and the child puts, okay? So you can give the child a spoon and the child puts it in the drawer. I'm gonna show you, the first video I'm gonna show you is not gonna look like life. The first video I'm gonna show you is where we just introduced that whole notion of I give and you put to a young woman, where she is learning how to participate in a role with somebody else. Okay, so the task is one person, the therapist is giving and she's putting. As you watch this, you'll see that the therapist is also beginning to add small challenges. So first she gives the spoon in the midline and the child puts it away. And then suddenly she's holding the spoon up and the child has to figure out how to get that spoon. It is amazing for so many of my kids who have been really good learners where they've learned to stay in their seats. One of the hardest things for them to do is when you hold up something for them to reach up to realize that they can actually stand up to get it, or even worse, have to move to get it. So you'll see this young woman figuring out that problem. So give me 1 second to set this up to get it. Uh-oh, my screen share is disabled, Lena? Lena?
I fixed it. It's okay.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry,
All
I
right,
don't know why that happened.
thank you. Okay. Let me make this big. Whoa, shoot. Hit the wrong thing. Sorry about that.
It looks like you have the right video though.
I have the right video. I just wanted to make it bigger.
Ah.
Okay. All right. So this is Hannah. So she's doing it, helping Hannah learn hand over hand to start. All right, so that's the first video. That is, okay. So what you saw within that was a progression from hand over hand to adding some challenges. And you saw Hannah actually had trouble standing up and figuring that problem out. It was interesting. She was like fraction of an inch away and it was hard for her to think that she could actually reach up to get it. So what I'm going to show you another video, and this video is more of life-based. It's again a giver-putter where the mom is giving her a tomato. In this case, they're in the garden, and the child's role is to put it into a basket. Okay, give me 1 sec. I hope I'm in the right video. 1 sec. Nope, wrong video. Sorry about that. This one. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So to start with, her mom is going to lead her to go pick tomatoes. And on the way, they're actually using a patterned walk where the little girl is following along. Mom is chanting, telling her what they're going to be doing. And then they get into the garden.
Poppy's big tomatoes. 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 A tomato, a big tomato.
So the role is split for picking tomatoes. Mom picks and gives, and Julia puts it into the basket.
We'll have to wash that one. I'll help her. Good if her mother knows what she's picking. Oh, it's stuck. Ew. Dirty tomato.
So look at all the things that Julia's learning about. She's learning about dirty. She's learning about yucky. She's
A little tomato.
she's learning to adjust
A little
how she's
one.
that she can stand up. She's learning to accept big and little. And if you'll notice, her mom is really waiting and giving Julia the time to assume her role independently. It's a huge piece because this is about Julia being able to participate. We will give a child up to 45 seconds to assume her role. And what's interesting, it took Julia a while to look up from playing with the pebbles, but then she was quick in terms of taking the next tomato. This is another part that we do where we switch roles. So now Julia is the one who's going to be picking, and her mom is going to be putting.
Hey, a red tomato.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oops. How do I get back to my screen? Stop screen sharing. Okay. So, whoops. Okay. So, giver putter is a basic role and it's easy to do. If you just learn to split roles with your child in a giver putter fashion, you can participate in every room. You can have your child participating in every single room of your house. Putting dishes away, putting spoons away in the kitchen, putting supplies away in the bathroom, putting clothes in drawers. There's a ton of different ways that you can incorporate it. All of it is listed. So many ways are listed in the handout that you have. I'm not going to go through it because I'm noticing that it's past 10:30 already. Okay, I would like to show you a couple of more, at least one or two more videos, just to get a sense of other ways that you can involve a child in activities. Okay. All right. Sorry, one sec. All right, let's do, okay.
Going to the kitchen.
Okay, so in this one, again, the mom's using a patterned walk and chanting to get there. But then what you're going to see is the role is the child has to open and pour. So the mom is just giving and the child is doing a more complex task. And it's, they're dumping water from water bottles.
To pour out water, go into the kitchen. To pour out water, going to the kitchen. To pour out water, going to the kitchen. To pour out water, we're going to the kitchen. To pour out water. Woo! Okay, come on, Gigi. Woo!
So go for open and then
That's
pour water.
That's his therapist, because we're not only doing the chore and the involvement and staying in the activity, but it's also about language. This is from a Zoom session just a couple weeks ago.
Water. Yeah. Gonna pour water. Gonna open.
Okay, so mom's job is to give,
Yeah, this
his
is-
job is to
Good
open,
job, Gigi.
and then to pour.
Anna,
Mommy.
Anna, water. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I want to show you something.
Gonna
Where-
pour water,
This goes on for a while.
Try
But-
pausing this time. I think he's got it.
So
Okay.
this goes on for a while. I'll let you see one more, and then I want to show you how mom then embedded a problem into this activity.
Yes.
Yes. And let
Okay.
Here's water.
So
Introduce him. Oh no!
so
This
now
doesn't go here.
mom gives him a juice.
Juice. Where does juice go?
So mom gives him a juice, and he interrupts what he's doing.
and let him do it, and then show him that there's another water waiting for him to pour.
Okay.
See, he managed to get the refrigerator
It
open,
goes in the refrigerator.
and now he's closing the refrigerator. And now he's coming back, and guess what?
Gigi,
He's going to stay in his role. Look how he goes back, right back to the sink. He's
yeah,
organized, and he's willing to participate. All right. And used his language, pour water. Okay. All right. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about something called declarative language. Declarative language is the language of experience sharing. It's the language we use to comment, to share experiences with our children. It's how we tell children about what we feel about things. It's how we basically formulate the basis for conversation. Our kids, special needs kids, hardly hear declarative language input. For the most part, they hear questions and directions. Do this, get that, what's this? Directions and questions that we really don't have to give them. With declarative language, what we try to do is present a situation and then let the children learn to infer information. Inferring information is where they have to think about it. So the difference between saying to a child, wipe the table, wherein I'm directing and thinking about what needs to be done, versus saying to the child, oh no, the table's wet, and then waiting and giving the child time to respond is huge. When the problem is presented for the child, as opposed to solved for the child, then the child learns to infer information and to think about things. It's the difference between a rote response and a thoughtful response. It's the difference between being a responder and an initiator. We need our kids to learn to think. Within chores, there are so many opportunities to use declarative language to present problems, to facilitate the child's ability to think. It happens naturally and it happens frequently. And it's exactly the practice that the children need. And it's exactly what helps the children to feel good. You feel good when you solve a problem. You feel good when you initiate. You feel good when you have a sense of competence. When we involve our kids in chores, we teach them about life. We teach them about things that need to be done. But more than that, we give them a platform to feel competent and a platform from which they will be able to become independent thinkers and independent life participants, which is exactly what they're going to be needed. They're going to be needing to do as they get older and move on, whether they wind up living longer with you in your home, whether they move out on their own completely, or whether they move into some kind of transitional setting. It doesn't matter. They need to know how to do chores. And most of all, they need to feel competent in themselves. So I hope this was useful. And I hope that you really, really do think about involving kids in chores. I know that the parents who have been Zooming with us through the clinic have been getting their kids to participate more and more, and they've been surprised on 2 levels. 1, what their child can do, and 2, how well they themselves are teachers and can share a sense of confidence for themselves and with their children. So it's been a pretty wonderful experience for us in the clinic as well. So I do hope everybody can take advantage of all the chores that need to be done at home now. All right. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, so please use the Q&A button because it's easier to keep track if you have any questions, and we'll give it a minute. Yeah, usually people type.
So while people are typing in their questions, I want to share a personal experience, which I don't always do, but my middle son was fortunate enough to have Nancy and her therapist in his life from a very young age. And probably at the age of 4, he began to learn how to do laundry. And he learned at the clinic, and then we transferred it over to home. And lo and behold, by the age of 6 or 7, he was doing his own laundry. Fast forward to the age of 17 last year, where he was at a summer college experience, suddenly realized that the boys on his floor didn't know how to do laundry. And he used that as an opportunity to learn and make new friends. And he took them all down to the laundry room and showed, 7 typical peers how to do laundry. So this type of stuff really builds critical thinking and social and language opportunities that we can't even imagine will be carried with them throughout their whole life. So
thanks for sharing that. I never knew that story.
Nope. I thought you would enjoy that.
I did.
Yeah, I think.
While we're waiting for any questions, there's one thing that I need to share with you in terms of declarative language. There is a handout for it. And if in fact you do try to use declarative language, I need you to understand that it is not easy. It is a tremendous process to learn how to use declarative language and to stop using directives and questions. So what I often tell parents is to choose just one room or even just one task and try to do declarative language just within that one task, and you'll see how challenging it can be. And the other trick is that if your sentence starts with a question word or a verb, like get, come, throw, it's not declarative, okay? So that's a little hint.
Sorry. So, well, if there isn't any other questions, doesn't seem to be. So, Janine, I think we'll probably call it a day then, if there's no other questions.
If people wind up having questions,
there is a question.
There is a question. Oh my goodness. But if people have questions after the fact, my email is on the handout, and you can feel free to shoot me an email and ask a question. Be happy to answer it.
Yeah,
and all of the handouts and all this information, including this presentation, have been shared to our Facebook page and also our website, so you can go there.
It was a statement. It was I work with young adults with developmental disabilities, and all this applies. Thank you very much. So it was.
You're welcome. I'm glad that it does. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. This has been
my
wonderful.
pleasure. Anytime.
We're so lucky to have you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody, and healthy.
You too.
Thank you very much.
All right. My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.